Okay, so buying a horse. First of all, you have to let your ego go. You know, like when we go buy a car, I don't remember ever talking to a dealer and asking them, "Hey, is this car going to get me to work? Does the engine work?" You don't. You go there with ego involved. You want the right color, the right make and model. Now, when it comes to horses, a little bit different. You're looking for functionality. When you get into like the show world or into the rodeo world, then you start looking at how the horse looks, what it appears. But when you're getting involved with horses, I always tell people, as soon as you get into that arena, leave your ego at the gate. Horses have no room for ego. They're not interested in how you appear. They're not interested in what you think you are. They're just interested in what you really are and how you're going to treat them. So when you're going to buy a horse, especially if this is your first horse and you're just starting out, let your ego go. This is not about how the horse looks. This is about how the horse functions. Is the horse going to get you to the goal that you want to achieve? I heard a quote the other day that said, "Finding a good horse, finding a good horse is harder than finding a boyfriend." I don't know if that's true. I've never tried to find a boyfriend. However, in finding a good horse, you should definitely take your time. It should. I've got a pasture full of great horses right in front of me, but they're all different levels. They wouldn't all take beginners. Some of them would. All great horses, but they're not all functional for everybody. So, do your homework. Think about what it is that you actually need this horse to do, what you're actually trying to achieve with your horse, and start from there. Let your ego go. Next, you need to be honest with yourself. How much are you actually going to ride this horse? You're the only one that can answer that. You know yourself better than anybody else. Are you actually going to ride every day? Are you going to ride a couple of times a day? Are you going to ride maybe a couple times a week, maybe just on the weekends? Or will you ride just every couple of months if you get invited on a trail ride? Those are things you want to think about. Like I said, you know yourself better than anybody else. You know exactly what you're going to follow through with. You can find horses that you can ride once, leave alone for a couple of months, and then ride again, and it's like they've never changed. Uh, there are other horses that you're going to have to spend every single day with. Think about that. Be honest with yourself. What are you actually going to be able to do on this horse, and how often will you actually use this horse? Also, be honest with yourself about your experience level. You might be excited about the idea of possibly rodeoing or showing later on in the future, but if you're just learning how to ride, you need to be honest about your experience level and realize that you just need a horse that you can just learn how to stay on top of. That's going to be a pretty tolerant, patient horse. If you're learning how to ride and you're just learning how to sort of move your horse around and how to move with your horse, then that's going to be a different horse. That's going to be a horse that's pretty tolerant, has a lot of patience, has a lot of experience with riders like you. A good horse for a beginner is a horse that we refer to as bomb-proof. Now, every horse is going to get scared. They're allowed to get scared. I try to remind people all the time that horses are allowed to be anxious, they're allowed to be scared, they're allowed to be excited. Those are all things that we're allowed to be, so a horse is allowed to be too, because a horse is a living creature. A horse that's bomb-proof is a horse that responds to stimulus and the environment around it, rather than just reacting. A good friend of mine said one time, you know, you want to respond to a medication and not react. If you're reacting to a medication, it means you have a rash. If you're responding to a medication, that means it's working. So you want a horse that actually responds to the environment around it. Now, if I'm riding along with one of my horses and something jumps out of the bushes, they might get scared. But I'm pretty certain my horses are not going to run off. They're going to wait for me. They're going to look to me for support. A horse that reacts might just bite down on the bit and take off running. So you want a horse that has some experience, that mentally is mature enough to be what we consider bomb-proof, that in those times and at certain obstacles is going to look to the rider for a little bit of support and won't necessarily try to leave the scene. So your bomb-proof horse is pretty comfortable with most obstacles, real-life obstacles, down trees, water crossings, and even if they are a little unsure of themselves, they're not going to try to take off from the situation. They're going to want to look for a solution. And conformationally, a bomb-proof horse may not be perfect. The horse that's going to be just right for you may not be perfect conformationally. However, they're not going to be lame. But they might not be show quality. That might not be the horse you're going to want to take into the show ring. But those are things that you're going to allow just because this horse mentally is going to be the horse that takes care of you in a pinch. Green horses and green riders are one of the biggest, most common mistakes. I've had a lot of people come to me over the years asking me to start colts for them, and they were a green rider because they like the idea of the horse and them learning together. That young horse is going to be looking to you for support. And if you don't have the support for them, if you don't have what it takes to help them through their situation and their anxiety, they're going to take over. This is going to become a huge issue for you. It's extremely unsafe. That horse needs way more support than your skill set is probably going to allow at this point. So please wait on that. Just learn how to work with a horse, learn how to stay in the saddle, and then it might be a goal that you have some years down the road that you get to ride some of the younger horses and work with younger horses. But please don't start out like that. It's not fair to the horse. The horse is learning all this stuff and this is all brand new. Like I've said before, all of this was our idea. Throwing a saddle on top of a horse was never the horse's idea. This is all ours. So if we're going to be asking the horse to do this kind of stuff, they're going to need some security, and they're going to need some strength behind them to help support them through this. The ideal beginning horse is probably going to be older with a lot of experience. Doesn't mean they're going to be cheaper, but they're going to be older. Like I said, the younger horses are not going to do it for you. You're going to be frustrated. Worst case scenario, you'll get hurt, or the horse will get hurt. There's an old saying that you never look a gift horse in the mouth. My advice is you always look the gift horse in the mouth. Somebody might be willing to give you a horse knowing that you're getting into horses. You might be looking at a really sweet deal. This is a horse you're going to want to take a close look at. A lot of times those horses can be really great, like I said about my wife's best rodeo horse. But some of those horses might not work out to be the best deal for you at the stage that you're at in your life. Now, moving on to show horses. If you look at a high-priced show horse, just because you're paying a lot for that horse doesn't mean that that's going to be the right horse for you. Just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it's the best. And what we talked about earlier with functionality, those kinds of horses that are expensive, show horses, really well trained, oftentimes have bells and whistles built into them that you might not know how to blow. Those are things that you're going to want to learn before you get onto those more advanced horses, or it's just going to end up in more frustration. That horse that's just right for you might not be conformationally correct. It might not be perfect conformationally wise. However, that horse might be just the right horse for you functionally to get you to where you want to go and to achieve the goals that you're looking to achieve. For example, I've got a horse right now who is 10 years old. He's got a little bit of arthritis in his leg. He's never taken a bad step. However, that horse to me is priceless because I know he's going to take good care of my kids. I just had my daughter on this horse in a ranch rodeo that we were in. I knew that my daughter was going to be good because this horse is absolutely safe. Now, compared to a 3-year-old Gypsy Vanner that I have right now, who is just getting started under saddle, price-wise, the Gypsy Vanner might be a little bit more expensive. But in my mind, the other horse, this other older gelding who's going to be taking care of my kids, way more expensive in my mind, and is way more useful.
Several years ago, Aaron and I were at a Mustang sale, and generally when we go to sales like that, we like to spend a couple of days just walking around through the pens and watching how the horses react to each other and how they respond in a herd environment. And this particular sale was right around the time that a movie came out called Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, and the lead character in this movie was a buckskin stallion. And we noticed that there were some families walking around that weren't necessarily horse people. It seemed like maybe they were just getting into horses. And they were letting their little kids pick out the horses. They were picking out, of course, all the buckskin horses that they could find in all the pens, all the prettiest horses. And some of these horses were just dangerous. They were just man-eaters in these pens. And something that these kids really had no business dealing with at all. And like I said, a lot of these families were not horse people, clearly, and they really had no business dealing with those either. And so I say that to make the point that in this process of finding a good horse and finding the horse that fits you correctly, um, use all the resources you can. Even when you think you've got a pretty good idea of what you want and what you're looking for, ask around and see if you can take along a friend that you trust, a horse person that you trust, to the sale or to the seller's house if you're going to go look at the horse, or if you're going to go to a barn or something to look at the horse. Take somebody that you trust that might be a good resource. You could even maybe hire a trainer for the day, or another horseman. Just ask them to come along with you. And people will be more than willing to help in this process. And this is something that, you know, you're going to be spending some money on a horse, and it's a living creature that you're going to have to deal with the results of. And it's not something that you want to make a mistake with. It's something you want to really put your time in, really put some thought into it. You can also ask us any questions. We're at on Facebook and Instagram at Rising DT Ranch, and then we're also our email is escalantehorse.com. Now, in the next video, I think we're going to talk about sort of the situation of when you're at the seller's barn or their house or wherever you're looking at this horse. We're going to go over some questions to ask before you meet and when you're there. And then we're also going to be going over some confirmation about the horse, the things you're going to want to look for in the horse itself. And anyway, so hopefully you'll join us for that video as well. And see you downriver.